In the cozy heart of North Carolina, as Christmas bells ring their tune, Triad families decorate and dream of a home they hope to buy soon. They are tired of paying rent, but have been too scared by the news. Less homes for sale and higher interest rates gave everyone the blues. But as we go into the new year, there's an opportunity for joy, as a new home is on Santa's wish list for every girl and boy. Rates are lower and homes are selling. The Triad is quite hot. The Sharp Mortgage team will talk to you with great care and thought. Even if you are not ready today to take the next step in your life, we know that life can change quickly for a husband and wife. There is no obligation to talk to our local team about your dreams. No stress at this time of year. It's as easy as it seems. Celebrate Christmas knowing you are well on your way to build beautiful traditions and magic for future holidays. The Sharp Mortgage team raises a toast to your family's festive cheer, whether you're ready now to buy or waiting till next year. A house truly becomes a home when filled with love and holiday songs. Christmas in your new home is where happy holiday hearts belong.
Josh Graham, Franklin Academy High School, WSJS, The Drive with Josh Graham, weekdays, 3 to 6.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
The voice of the Triad. He really has grown up before his listening audience over the past 6+ years. You've gotten married. You've become a new father. Josh Graham, host of The Drive and WSJS, is on Triad Sports One-on-One. We'll get to the new head football coach at Wake, Carolina, and so much more that is driving the sports conversation in the area. But Josh, how are you? How is the family? How are you thriving this holiday season?
I'm trying to grapple with that great title that you gave me that I push back on so strongly about voice of Triad Sports, like, or not, you just the Triad. I wouldn't go that far at all either. Like Laney Pope and all the legends that, I mean, we listen to Laney for weather stuff, especially this time of year, more than we listen to anything sports related. And then when I got here, it's like, no, come on, Kyle Schassburger. It's Ed Harden we're talking about here. But then Ed Harden, I miss that guy's writing more than anything ever. And then you kind of just look around at the landscape and it is a lot different than it was even 5, 6, 7 years ago. So all that to say, very kind, and I'm very happy to be here.
With that said, the one constant thing in our industry, Josh, is change. And if you've been in your position for at least 5 years, I think that validates the quote-unquote voice of the Triad, at least from a sports standpoint. So, yeah, you've been there long enough, man. You've been kicking, you've been going. Let's get some background because this is truly a unique visit for you and for me. I'm sure I'm thrilled to actually do this, especially as we take special inventory on our lives around this time of the year because we've never had this opportunity to chat like this. So those who know you most around these parts do so because of your afternoon sports talk show, 3 to 6 weekdays, The Drive on WSJS. But chart your path. What gave you this bug to do sports talk, and was it a format you dabbled in by accident or by choice while doing your undergrad at ECU? And how is it that you've come to embrace it the way that you have?
When I was growing up, Kyle, play-by-play caught my attention. It was something that introduced me to this industry. When I was in middle school, high school, I wasn't really listening to sports talk except maybe growing up outside of Raleigh. There's a station called The Fan, 99.9 out that way, and became associated with guys who I'm now very close friends with, Adam Gold, Mike Maniscalco, the voice of the Canes, and Joe Ovius. The list goes on that station. And that's kind of what I grew up listening to. But play-by-play was always the interest. I was the guy when I was, 10, 11 years old, would turn down the volume on games, do the play-by-play, all that. When I was in high school, I was able, through association of like a small weekly paper, get credentials to go to the Hurricanes locker room when I was a junior in high school. And I figured out in very early streaming, like 2008, 2009, how to stream my high school's basketball games. And we do the home games, and I did all the basketball. This is, again, as a junior and a senior. So when I went to East Carolina, I had a literal tape that Mike Maniscalco helped me cut when I was a senior in high school that I gave to the radio station at East Carolina. And they were just like, wait a minute, you're in high school? You have a tape? Like, you were able to broadcast games? How? Streaming? Like, it was all so new, but it gave me reps, and it allowed me to get in the door at East Carolina right out of the gate, where my entire tenure as a student at ECU, my 4 years, I never attended a football game as a fan, not once. I was always in the press box right out of the gate, working and getting familiarized with the industry. Then great advice that John Forsland, the former voice of the Canes, gave me was learn how to write. So then I worked for the student newspaper. I worked for the I worked for the Scout site at that time before it was bought by 24/7. And I was just doing as much as I can, to the point where the school made a literal rule because of me that you cannot work for multiple student media outlets at the same time, because I was working for five: the yearbook, the TV, the radio station, the newspaper. I was doing it all.
Show
and
off.
then no, well, it helped me pay for school. Honestly, like, this is like what helped me pay for my college, along with like one summer selling books door to door in Texas, making 18 grand all commission, like 80 hours a week doing this. And it was all ambition. It was all working hard. But then when you start to become a professional, my first job out of college was in Colorado. You start looking at path. I started doing like more talk shows and play by play. And when I looked at what the controllables were, because a big motto in my life has been control what you can control, I felt that it was less controllable for me to progress in the play-by-play industry than it was if you do talk. In other words, so much of the decisions I saw that were made for play-by-play announcers is based on where you're from, where you went to school. When you do well, no one talks about the ratings for radio broadcasts for the schools that you cover, because it's not attributed to the talent itself. It's just, a lot of people like Wake Forest football, even if Stan Cotton might be the greatest play-by-play guy there is. Like, versus talk, nothing is there unless I put it there. Like, I'm creating the content. Thus, if you get ratings, you have that wielded, that you can go into station directors, like you could go into their office and say, this is evidence that I'm good at this, and I can progress a lot easier through that field. So it wasn't a conscious decision, and the way you put it was great. Did you decide? How did you decide? I loved both mediums, and I felt there were more controllables with pursuing talk than pursuing play-by-play. And that's the decision I made upon coming to the Triad and not doing any play-by-play anymore.
You're speaking my language. I feel like we could talk about this exact topic for 30 minutes, an hour, maybe even an entire day, but we do have to try and move it along. There is one thing
you were worried I was going to go for a half hour with that answer. That's my bad.
Well, you're right about the play-by-play. I mean, that's the path that, I have decided to choose for myself, but all of the challenges that you mentioned are things that I and other aspiring play-by-play guys are facing. And it's not about even being the best play-by-play. You can be the best play-by-play guy in the world. You could be as technical, as seamless, as fluid, as conversational, as easy to listen to as anyone, but that's not going to get you the best job. It's all like anything in this business or anything in life. It's about who you know. It's about your network connections. But with you in the talk space, you're right. Like, you have to be very good. You have to be able to generate reaction and conversation and do it in a unique way. And that's a more difficult lift, a more difficult task. And I think that scares people away from that space too, as well. And you've been able to master that in a sense.
What made that dawn on me? I talked to a major decision maker when it comes to making play-by-play hires. And I remember I won't say the school, there was a college hire that was made that I found interesting, because the person who was hired was closely connected to that school, but didn't have a lot of experience previously. And it was a pretty big brand. And I asked, this probably was, I won't say how long ago it was, but it was a while back. And I was like, was he the best announcer that you interviewed? And he sat back and said, well, he was the best announcer, ... for that school. And we've seen instances in
it's
the
all
past
about
where
fit. I mean, you hear fit all the time.
Right. We've seen instances where people who had been doing it for decades were passed over in favor of like former players from a team, to take opportunities without any experience. So I remember looking at that at the time I made the decision and thought, okay, at least with talk, if I draw ratings, if I find a way to create buzz, it's off the back of my hard work where, hey, I landed this interview because I built this relationship. That's still Coach K. You might not care what I think. You might care what he thinks. And you build those relationships and you create a good show. And I feel that there's a lot more leverage you have in that position than you would in the play-by-play round, because at the root of play-by-play, every decision maker knows I could put anybody in that chair probably, and the fan bases are so strong, they're still going to listen.
Sure, sure. Everybody can call a game too once you get down to it. Once you're going into that candidate pool and evaluating candidates, we all have different styles, but it's not about the play-by-play that's going to get you the job. So that's fascinating. Here you say all that. You're right. There's not one thing you said wrong there. And I'm curious about, you talked about writing and developing that skill. How has that helped your delivery in terms of executing a show and being able to organize your thoughts and to speak clearly, convincingly, deliberately every single day, 3 to 6?
Oh, it just helps from a tightness perspective, where when I have things written out beforehand and I organize things structurally that way, starting with writing rather than speaking things into existence or just riffing, I find that things are tighter. And if things are tighter, you could get to more topics. And if you could get to more topics, then your show is inherently more interesting. So, like, for the show I'm preparing for right now, like, I have like pages and pages of notes that I then condense onto a sheet of paper that I have right here. And thus it's organized in a way that I can go from point A to point B to point C. And oftentimes I do not get to everything on here, because sometimes something hits or you do riff off of that, and that creates something fun that me and the producer of the show, Will Dalton, go back and forth on. And because, yeah, nobody wants to listen to somebody just read off a piece of paper 3 hours of what you have. But structurally, if you have bullet points in your head and you have things written down in front of you that you kind of have a general idea for where you're headed, that's the best way to do it. And I think the writing ability allows for you to have a better ear for what to cut, if that could make sense, how to edit yourself.
Sure. What's the challenge you find yourself facing more often than others in creating content, engaging that listenership, even the viewers, because your show is, it can be viewed now. That's what the digital space has provided for us, especially in a daily sports talk space.
I'll tell you what, I wrestle with this. It's who is ultimately the audience. For me, I think about the Triad first, but sometimes the Triad sports fan might not primarily think about the teams that are within the Triad first. It's a unique market in the sense of, like, okay, Wake Forest is a perfect example of this. Wake Forest is our area's ACC team. They are that. But they're also a small private school. And if you walk around and go to sports bars and you hang out with sports fans amongst the Triad, you're going to see a lot more Carolina shirts. You're going to see a lot more App State gear than you see Wake Forest gear. You're going to run into more Carolina alumni and more App State alumni than you're going to run into Wake Forest alumni. So in terms of putting together topics to talk about, okay, well, where does that fall into the chain? Because when I'm thinking about what topics to choose, a misconception from people listening would be, these are the things that I'm interested in talking about. No, this is me thinking in my head, what percentage of the Triad cares about this subject? And whatever the highest percentage is, that's what I view to be a winning topic. And I'm going to talk about that more than the ones that are lesser percentages. And North Carolina, you hear it when outsiders come in, people who had not been here. See, you've been here for so long, and I grew up in this state, that I understand and accept some of the ways that it's unique. And I say unique in the actual way that it's meant to be said. One of one, not rare. It's jarring to people who come in and they're like, wait a minute. So you have the NFL team there and you have an NBA team, but the college teams people care about more than those teams? Yeah, in the aggregate. And then you got 4 of them, but they're kind of like interesting niches where you go. And then where does App State and East Carolina factor into this? And then you get to the rest of it. It really is just a fascinating sports scene. But from putting together a topic tree on a day-to-day basis, what do people care about the most? That's the thing that I wrestle with. And then when you get into YouTube algorithms, that can make things even more
Sure.
different when you get into the digital space.
The self-promotion, it's seemingly 24/7, and finding
Yeah.
the correct recipe for snackable content through social media, the correct social media, the right platforms in new or innovative ways too is something I battle, and struggle with, but certainly embrace, because that's the future. You've always got to be working those wires in your brain to figure out how to promote your content. If you were to bump into one of your listeners on the street, and I'm sure you do every day,
Yeah.
how would you want them to describe the listening experience when they're following your show? What do you want them to gain from the product that you deliver each and every day?
That this guy's one of us. That this person is a liaison to the sports teams that I like, that I'm interested in. That when I hear Josh ask what Roy Williams would describe to be an unusual question, or Cam Newton laughs at something, or you ask something that's difficult that a coach gets mad at me about, or whatever, that I'm asking a question on behalf of people that have those questions, that are fans, that are listeners. And then on the show, just somebody that you would feel perfectly comfortable walking up to and saying, "Hey, how's Sarah Bradford? What's going on with Willow the dog?" And that happens. It's funny. I have a newish house that we moved into like 3 or 4 months ago, and we are just trying to make sure everything works. And we had some questions about this oven that was left behind. So we had a gas man come in and look at it, see if there were any leaks, anything like that. And he said, "You might need a new oven." And he's walking out the door. He's like, "Is this Willow the dog?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that is. How do you know my dogs?" "Oh, I listen every day." And I'm like, "New house, white dog. Your wife's name's Sarah Bradford. Okay, I've kind of like figured this out." And then it just led to a casual conversation. And most people might find that strange. And my wife sometimes finds it odd. Just like, that person was like referencing me and our dog, and we've never met that person before. Isn't that weird to you? It's like, well, no, that's exactly that. That tells me I'm doing the job that I'm supposed to do, which is being relatable, being that person in your car that you feel like is one of you.
And it's beautiful too, because there's no more intimate medium out there than through radio. So to
Yeah.
develop those relationships and draw closer with the listeners, yeah, that's awesome, man.
There's no place like home for the holidays. A place where memories are made. A place where family and friends come together. But what if this holiday season has you looking for a new home? With everything you pile onto your plate this time of year, let the Ginther Group relieve some of that stress and pressure. First of all, they're experts on the local real estate market, and then they'll add personalized guidance to the experience. Let's face it, the holidays are stressful, and the idea of moving during them can be overwhelming. The Ginther Group is here to make the process smooth and even enjoyable. If you're seeking the perfect home for your holidays, then call the Ginther Group now at 336-283-8689 or go to their website at theginthergroup.com. Even if it's not the right time to buy or sell, that's okay. You can still meet with them about your 2025 real estate goals, so you can work with a team you can trust to have you ready when the time is right. That's 336-283-8689. Call the Ginther Group today.
At Dewey's, we celebrate every day, but no one celebrates the holidays like we do. Right now, it's the season for sweet treats at any of our 3 Triad area locations. In Winston-Salem at Thruway and Renolda Manor. Plus, one in Greensboro at Friendly Shopping Center. Easy holiday ordering is also available at local.deweys.com. It's also the season for raising sweet dough for your organization. Contact any Dewey store for information on how you can set up your own holiday fundraiser where 50% of the items sold go immediately back to your organization. Plus, holiday stores will be popping up from mid-November until Christmas Eve. In the Triad and beyond, these special holiday shops will assist in raising money for nonprofits, and the locations can be found by visiting Deweys.com starting in November. So make the holidays special for the ones you love and others with Dewey's Bakery, home of free Cake Square Monday all year round. Dewey's, celebrate every day.
It's time to get serious about your financial future. It's never too early, but it could be too late to get started. And that's oftentimes the hardest part, getting started. How much do I save? Where do I invest? Do I save for college or retirement? How much for each? And who do I talk to about it all? Okay, we'll keep things simple for now and help you answer the last one. We recommend you begin with a local financial advisor. And that's Jennifer Johnson of Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. She'll sit down with you for a complimentary introductory consultation and go over all of your questions. Get started on the path to achieving your financial goals. Visit 3magnoliasfinancialadvisors.com or call 336-701-1600. Get comfortable with your financial future. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. Retirement, financial planning, and investments. Securities offered through Private Client Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors and Private Client Services are not affiliated. Private Client Services is under separate ownership from any other named entity.
Let's unleash you on some items that are certainly sending shockwaves through the souls of NC Triad sports fans and beyond. The hot tub take machine. You can lease that. I came up with it. You can lease it if you want. That could be maybe some content material for you throughout the week. But there's been no shortage of topics. It's great fodder here under the tree in advance of Christmas and the new year. We have to start with Jake Dickert, formally introduced to Deaktown as the 33rd head coach by AD John Curry on Thursday, replacing Dave Clawson, who on Monday announced his resignation following 11 transformative seasons. That's press release verbiage, not mine. That included a run of 7 straight bowls, a division title, and the program's first ever top 10 ranking. The Quad appeared to be buzzing for all the right reasons, Josh, in spite of a sudden, some would say, unsurprisingly change in football leadership.
I like the fit. I like the hire because Dave Clawson said this earlier this week. He made like a joke in passing at his press conference. He's like, I'm sure you guys haven't enjoyed the pressers the last 2 years, how often I've been complaining about where college sports has been headed. And he laughed, but I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like at a certain point, it's, well, this is the job that you signed up for. When in reality, in Clawson's case, it isn't. Like imagine going into a time machine to tell Dave Clawson, okay, in 10 years, you're going to be sharing a conference with Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill, where he's going to have his NFL GM running things and have a $20 million payroll to figure out where to pay guys. Like he would have a million questions and probably wonder whether or not he wants to take the job in the first place, if that's where college sports ends up. So Clawson did not sign up for that. And, good on him for having that recognition and saying, I don't think I'm the right guy for this and stepping away, because we've seen the other version of this where it goes poorly, where David Cutcliffe sticks around a little bit too long and he doesn't get the retirement presser. He doesn't get the moment in the sun where people can celebrate him. It kind of ends a little bit ugly, and he gets replaced by Mike Elko. Mike Elko did a great job. Manny Diaz now doing a great job at Duke, as we know. So Clawson, he steps away. Jake Dickert comes in, and Jake Dickert isn't talking about the challenges that exist at Wake. He's talking about the opportunity, and that dude means it, because whatever problems you believe Wake Forest has, and they always have them, and they have them today, and they're going to have them in the future, they pale in comparison to the problems that he faced at Washington State, where he has OCs, DCs pulled away. He has his quarterback, Cam Ward, lost, even though they have a 7-figure offer to try to keep him in place. And the same for the quarterback that they just lost to Oklahoma, in addition to the offensive coordinator. Like, this is what he was dealing with every year. The university president is on the way out, saying he's going to retire at the end of this year. You have, of course, being annexed, as he put it, from the Pac-12, from the Power 4.
I love that word, too, being annexed. The fact he throws that in, I mean, that's not lost on him. Plus his AD, too, who was, I believe, overseeing the whole Rolovich not, going with the COVID mandate at the university, and then Dickert gets thrusted in the interim role. His AD, Pat Chun, then leaves for the bigger Big Ten school, the state rival Washington.
There it is. So, he's dealt with all of that, and he had an 8-win season this year, and he went 23-20. 8-win season, 23-20 in his career at Washington State. So he's looking at Wake Forest thinking, yeah, Okay, smallest power conference school. Okay, you might not have as much money as the people down the road. I know I'm in a Power Four conference. I just saw what SMU did in their first year without taking any of the TV revenue. Why not Wake Forest, especially when you know that Wake Forest is going to be patient, that you have great leadership with Curry and Wente, where you're talking about a school that's made 2 coaching changes in this century? Like, it's been Jim Grobe and Dave Clawson, and that's it. And they let Dave Clawson lose a lot his first 2 years, winning 6 games his first 2 seasons. So you know you have patience, you know you have more resources, you know you have a better conference that you're stepping into. And all of that is a plus from what you had at Washington State before. So it's good that you have a younger guy, 41 years old, who's ready to attack the problems versus having Dave Clawson, who did incredible things at Wake, and that should not be minimized at all, but admitted it himself. I could adapt to these things. I just don't want to quote him. And that's the difference between 57 and 41 and the stages of career that they're at. Wake Forest saw a guy who's willing to deal with problems and deal with them well and overcome them well. And that's what made Jake Dickert a good fit.
Yeah, anybody who follows the sport closely and not even that closely, it doesn't take a lot to read the room and look at what Dave Clawson has done and see how the sport has changed over the last handful of years, and especially the last 2 to 3, and you see a dip in a couple of 4-8 seasons, and you don't need Clawson to open his mouth to tell you why he's exiting the game. You know, at 57 years old, he's done coaching, but he is going to hang around in a special advisor role under John Curry here moving forward. And Dickert, to your point, the opportunity, it's tremendous. He told you that yesterday. You know, 3 bowl bids in 4 years, had them inside the top 20 each of the past 2 seasons, climbing as high as number 13 a year ago, 8-1 start this season, and views it as an incredible opportunity. What's next for him, though, here at Wake to try and steady the ship? Because, you know, Wake Forest, I don't want to call him the doormat in the ACC, because Dave Clawson had taken them to those quote-unquote transformative years. It was, the press release says, quote, an indelible legacy, is one of the most successful and impactful leaders in athletics history. But, you know, you prefaced the question with Jake on Thursday, you know, there are challenges. So, like, how does Dickert, given what he went through at Washington State, I get it, not an ideal situation there, and he bolts for a more stable situation. But what's next for him? What kind of staff is he expected to field together? What kind of NIL pool might be available? What are some portal rumblings that might be there to help make Wake Forest a competitor right away in 2025?
Well, John Curry told us yesterday when he came on the show that they are fully committed to spending to the cap for the revenue sharing that's coming. So you're talking about $20 million that you can share amongst your programs however you see fit. Wake has great donors that support their Olympic sports. This is why they do so well in it. So they're probably not having to devote a lot of that revenue share money towards that. We'll see what the pool looks like. I don't even know if we'll ever learn specifically what the pool is between men's and women's basketball and football, but you do have revenue sharing that is going to even the playing field a little bit. Worst case scenario, it's, at least in the near term, it's the start that Dave Clawson had, where you talk about winning 6 games in 2 years. And Dave even said, be patient with whoever the next coach is, the same way you were patient with me. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, I remember people saying 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that it was, all right, David Cutcliffe left the cupboard bare, man. Good luck to Mike Elko. Don't know how that guy is going to win. And then all that dude did was win. And if Duke could do that, well, why can't Wake Forest do that, especially with the evening out of the playing field that will be revenue sharing? I don't know if the revenue sharing will fully take off in 2025. Certainly by 2026 it will. So there's your best case scenario in the context of the state of North Carolina. What we saw with Mike Elko in his 2 years at Duke, that's the best case for the first 2 years of Jake Dickert. And the worst case is the first 2 years that we saw with Dave Clawson. And likely the answer is going to be somewhere in between, Kyle.
The candidate pool at Wake couldn't have been as deep as it was at North Carolina. And Tar Heels
No.
AD Bubba Cunningham pulled arguably the biggest head coaching coup in the sport's history, landing 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach Bill Belichick. How and why? This is going to go either spectacularly bad or exquisitely beautiful. I'm not sure if there's any middle ground here, Josh.
What's funny about that is you're right. They got the biggest coup. They got Belichick. But Wake Forest's search was 100 times better than the search that North Carolina had. Like Wake Forest had your coach tell you, hey, you can go talk to other candidates 10 days before they made it official. And that's key, because if we learned 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, that Clawson was leaving, then maybe half his roster's in the portal by now. But since you announce it Monday and you have the coach by the end of the week, well, Damon Claiborne's meeting with the guy yesterday. Like the players aren't exactly immediately jumping into the portal. And there was no drama with the board of trustees and the president and whatever and the AD. There was, like, at Carolina, they were firing off. The amazing nature of the Belichick hire is it now gives power to the person on the keyboard, on the message boards, saying the outlandish, crazy thing, and me making fun of that person because, well, it happened. It's like every year we had to hear when NC State would make a change. Oh, well, Bill Cowher's coming home. Let's just back up the Brinks truck. He lives in Raleigh, don't you know? He went to school there. Bill Cowher's coming. He's coming. John Gruden at Tennessee. Oh, it's happening. He's coming. Like, it's the most message board thing ever. Bill Belichick, hire that guy to go to Carolina. It happened. So then when somebody else messages me, hey, you know who was his defensive coordinator at Cleveland? Nick Saban. Let's just hire that guy to be the DC. And I want to say, you're nuts. But then again, Carolina just hired Bill Belichick. So I don't know what to do with my hands. I really don't. In terms of how it will work, that all depends on what your definition of work is. Because if Carolina basketball continues to suffer in the eyes of those who love Carolina basketball, not meeting expectations, and the reason why is because of lack of funding. Hey, BYU got the number one player in the country, and he picked BYU over North Carolina. Why? Because BYU paid more. Hey, Alabama goes into the Smith Center 2 weeks ago and beats the brakes off the Tar Heels with a guy that North Carolina had on campus, a center that they didn't get because Alabama paid more. And now you're paying $10 million a year for Bill Belichick and $20 million in NIL money. So 9-3 is a win in my book. That's fantastic in year one for Belichick. But if it's 9-3 at the cost in the eyes that matter in Chapel Hill of the basketball program not being where they need to be, well, then that'll be an interesting story to follow. And it seems to be a moving target, what exactly success looks like. Because with that schedule, Kyle, I think 9 wins is the minimum to be considered success for Belichick in year one. You don't have SMU. You don't have Florida State. You don't have Miami that you have to face. You got Clemson, but they're at home. Like, that schedule is as cake as you can get in the ACC. So 9 is the minimum of what I would deem to be success, but it might be 10-2 for the people that really wear Tar Heel blue and might still love basketball more than football.
It's so interesting. It's amazing. And giddy up for a Bill Belichick-led North Carolina trip to Jerry Richardson Stadium at Charlotte the month of September. I'm sure Bill will plenty enjoy that one. We should note NCAA is a new football coach, too, in Sean Gibbs. All right, Josh, we are going to bounce around because we got to get you to a Christmas party. So let me hit some of these other football programs. Get your take on some hoops. So the portal is percolating. We touched on that. NIL, you got the House bill settlement that'll create billions of dollars and roughly 20 mil for all these universities. It's a wild time of the year with bowl season, and we're really getting into the thrust of basketball. And I want to use the transfer portal here as a springboard to talk about Duke a little bit more because they're in the wildness of the calendar. Because Duke is playing Ole Miss in the Gator Bowl after a 9-3 regular season, inaugural year from Manny Diaz. Starting quarterback Malik Murphy enters the portal one day. Seemingly a day later, they land a coveted QB transfer from Tulane in Darian Mensah for next season. I sort of think Manny told Malik, hey, you want to leave? Like, hey, take a walk. We're about to upgrade. But that's between you, me, and our entire audience. So I don't think it's that much of a secret. But you can't blame the players necessarily for jumping into the portal for a system that's been created for them. The free agency of college athletics, right, related to NIL and the pending settlement that will create these direct payments. But, man, dude, this is a wild confluence of events on the calendar this time of year.
It is. And I think what you're hitting on, though, is everybody got so pro player that they didn't start to think about what the consequences might be when coaches use those same rules to their advantage. Like, you want to make these guys feel like pros, right? Well, guess what pros also deal with? Being cut. Or coaches looking at potential edges and upgrades that might be better than what you are. So I'm not saying that Malik Murphy wanted to stay at Duke. I don't know that. But it seems pretty obvious that Manny Diaz had the conversation. Hey, we think we're going to get somebody else at this position, and had a general idea that it was going to be Tulane quarterback Darian Mensah. By the way, I was at the game that Mensah visited as a recruit before he committed the Duke basketball game, and it's the first time I could ever remember the Cameron Crazies recognizing a Duke recruit for one, and then going as far to say, Darian Mensah, sit with us. Darian Mensah, sit with us. And then he came over and went into the Crazies and enjoyed the basketball game. So that's how the portal works. And if it's going to work well for the players, then the coaches are going to figure out ways to make it work well for them as well. It is a crazy time of year when you consider Cooper Flagg's turning 18 years old over the holiday, and Duke basketball is where they're at. And we'll see how Duke can hold up without their top two quarterbacks when they face Ole Miss, and an Ole Miss coach in Lane Kiffin who's constantly looking for opportunities to troll the ACC.
NC State and ECU in the Military Bowl. Grayson McCall experiment failed for the Wolfpack. ECU has played inspired since Blake Harrell took over, and now will be the head coach moving forward post Mike Houston. There's maybe, and you know this better than anyone as an ECU grad, there's maybe 132 other teams the Pack and Dave Doran would rather see in the postseason, especially considering the underperforming season relative to the preseason expectations.
Yeah, and the reason you don't want to see them is because I think without them having played in the last few years, they haven't played, I think, since the game in Greenville 2 years ago, where it was a last-second kick that NC State missed wide right the same day as that North Carolina App game up on the mountain in Boone. Some of these guys, CJ Bailey, good example, might not know what the history is between these two teams, might not care much about ECU. Meanwhile, I can tell you, the folks in Greenville, America, they're ready for this one. They're ready to go. So will they be able to match up? And you got a coach who obviously has a lot to prove after having the interim tag removed and losing the home finale to Navy. That's going to be a spectacle, and you don't get a lot of those outside of the CFP games nowadays with the Bulls. And you got both starting quarterbacks in the game, Caton Hauser going up against CJ Bailey. You got both the head coaches. So NC State ECU, that's one of the better non-CFP games of bowl season that you could have circled for the 28th and in Annapolis. And I think it's going to be well attended by the folks wearing purple. And it's also worth noting that these teams will open up 2025 against each other. So
Okay.
there's the gamesmanship here of, okay, how does this game potentially affect what next year might look like schematically in terms of like familiarity with the personnel. So there are a lot of interesting angles to this game. Can't wait to watch it.
That's awesome. I hadn't looked ahead. I wonder how often it's happened where two teams meet in a bowl and then play to open the very next season. College football playoff prediction for you. We're recording the morning of the first ever CFP game in the new 12-team format as Notre Dame hosts Indiana on Friday night. I'm sporting the Irish hat.
Yes.
I am a Golden Domer, being from the south side of Chicago, an Irish Catholic. Grew up as part of my, a birthright of sorts. Although equally,
you're an ACC guy. I mean, come on.
And living in North Carolina, I got to take the ACC. So Notre Dame is one of those quote unquote pseudo members. But although I will say, growing up in south side of Chicago, half the people love to hate Notre Dame as well because that's how polarizing a brand that they are, nationally. Yeah. So you got the ACC who gets both championship game participants in, and Clemson who plays at Texas. SMU visits Penn State. Oregon, Georgia, Boise, Arizona State receive first-round byes. Who do you like to win it all?
I'm going to go with the team with the one flawless resume, and that's Oregon. A lot of people – I'm also looking forward to just like how people were going to overreact in a giant way to the first ever CFP. Like, if there are these snow games, you're going to have people say, well, this is terrible if the games are bad. This is amazing if the games are great. Oh, if the ACC loses both its games in the first round. Well, the ACC clearly didn't belong, and we need Ole Miss, we need South Carolina and Alabama to get in. Like, the overreaction, get ready for what that's going to look like. But I'll bank on Oregon just because I think they're better than Tennessee or Ohio State. We're still getting round two. And then from that point on, I think the matchups are only going to get better for them. I'm going to bank on Dan Lanning. I'm going to bank on Dylan Gabriel. And I think they're the one great team that we have this year. There's a lot of other really good ones as the portal and NIL has allowed for things to flatten out a little bit. You don't have those super team rosters like we had even just a few years ago, where all the talent seemed to be on Alabama and Georgia's rosters, or maybe Ohio State. Now it's spread out a bit where I don't know quite how to separate teams 2 through 8 in terms of like the final rankings, not exactly where the seeding is. They all have chances to make deep runs through this thing, and that's what makes it exciting. Thankful that we don't have a 4-team format, because good luck to the committee trying to figure out who to include and who to leave out between Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State, if you assume that Georgia and Oregon are set there. So I'm happy we have it. I'm happy it's on campus, and I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks just because they're the one entity I have the most trust in based on the regular season.
Well, they're the one team that's passed every test, the only undefeated team. And to your point, there is no great team. You called Oregon great, and they are, just because they passed every test and haven't lost a game. But that's the beauty of this season, man, with the new 12-team playoff. There's not this world beater type team. I mean, any one of these 12 teams, I can see potentially winning this thing. You know, that's what makes it great. I'd feel better about Oregon had they tripped up and maybe lost one. I'm a little worried that they haven't tasted adversity yet, and they're coming in with this unbeaten record and the only team, and they have the most difficult draw, I think, the way we're seeding teams, because they're going to get the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, which gives me pause. But I'd love to see Notre Dame make a run. I said when they lost to Northern Illinois, they should be immediately eliminated from the playoff. But the Notre Dame guy in me is very happy that we're in this position and we're hosting the first ever CFP game on Friday night. Before I let you go, any big picture college basketball takes? You mentioned Duke and Cooper Flag already. They seem to be as advertised. State is off the Final Four, trying to replicate and conjure up some of that same energy. North Carolina already has 5 losses, and Wake Forest is primed for an NCAA tournament return with high NIL earner Hunter Salas.
I think I've been a big defender for the ACC in terms of they deserve more than 5 bids the last 3 years. And this year, it's going to be hard to defend them for the way that they've played out of conference. It's one of the worst non-conference showings that I've ever seen. And aside from Duke, there's no one you trust a ton, because Duke's ranked in the top 5, where it's supposed to be. Clemson's ranked 25th as we're having this conversation, and they're barely in there after losing at home to Memphis, and they have Wake Forest in conference play tomorrow at Little John. So I think, I mean, if you include Clemson in that, all right, you have 2 teams. Now try to tell me for sure with North Carolina potentially being 500 at Christmas and Wake Forest without a super impressive win and just the inability to win on the road, who maybe Pittsburgh, but then again, Pittsburgh laid an egg against Mississippi State, got blown out in that ACC SEC challenge. And if we just assume all those teams get in, well, that puts you right at 5. And that's assuming a lot. And that's just to get to that number that we took such great umbrage with the ACC only being given the last handful of years. So there's your big picture story to follow. The metrics aren't going to love the ACC, and now we're getting into only games that feature ACC teams playing each other. And Duke might be the meal ticket. Pay attention to who Duke loses to, because those are probably the teams that have a shot at making the tournament from the ACC this year.
And if we're talking about 12, 13 SEC teams getting in, that's going to take away from the ACC. The A10 might be a 3-bid league. I mean, now we're getting in the mode, Josh. I love it. With football coming to an end, we're talking bracketology already.
How many SEC bids do they need to win a title? I don't know. It's been a dozen years since they've won anything, and then I have to hear See, my problem isn't that the SEC gets their flowers. They deserve to get their flowers this basketball season for what they've seen. My problem is when people fire shots at the ACC, but then have nothing for the Big Ten, who do not have an elite team this year. At least the ACC has Duke. And you're going to have more teams get in from the Big Ten, sure. But I don't want to hear people from the Big Ten tell me how great that conference is versus the ACC when they haven't won a damn thing in 25 years. Oh, cool, Purdue got to the title game. That's awesome. But, I mean, you're not going to give any points to Miami and NC State for getting to the Final Four the last couple of years either. Come on. Win a title for the first time in 25 years before I have to start hearing about how much better that conference is than the ACC. So the SEC, fine, you've earned it. Okay, great, you're doing everything. The Big Ten is where I take the issue.
He's on Twitter on X at Josh Graham Show. On Twitter, it says Charles Barkley called you some idiot in the press. Is there a snippet we can look up to remind ourselves of that happening?
Yeah, I can dig that up. I can dig that up because
dig that up. Text that.
He
that
found
to me
a clip. He found a clip of me asking a question and they played it on the show of me asking Roy Williams a question, and then Barkley's like, some idiot in the press asking this question. And then I ran into Chuck in Winston-Salem and reminded him of that. I said, hey, Chuck, you called me an idiot once. And he looked at me. He goes, when did I do that? And then I told him, and he said, oh, yeah, you are an idiot. And then he met my wife, and it's like, where'd you go to
I do
school?
recall
Virginia. That. You guys stole a title from Auburn in 2019. And I'm like, oh, okay, great.
That's
what
awesome.
up, Chuck? There
That's
you go.
awesome. Karaoke maven, favorite karaoke song?
Thank you for having me, by the way. Favorite. I don't have one because my one karaoke rule is, and this is back when I used to do karaoke more. I'm not a good singer, by the way. I'm like the worst karaoke singer that likes to sing karaoke. There you go.
Okay. All right.
I have a thing where I sing a different song every single time I go. So when I hear songs on the radio that I like and that I've sung before, it goes back to a specific memory when I'm like, oh, I remember in Wilmington when I got on stage and sang Akon. Oh, I remember when I was on a boat and sang Scars by Papa Roach. I remember when I sang Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell. So it just gives different association to these songs now when you sing a different one each time. They're connected to a specific night, a specific memory.
I love it. That's the versatility. It speaks to Josh Graham. Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. Been a lot of fun catching up, my dude. Say hi to DJ at the Christmas party, all right?
He just walked by. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Merry Christmas to you, Kyle. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode on the Triad Podcast Network. Our mission is simple: provide information, advice, and stories about the people and places that make the North Carolina Triad such a great place to be. You can find us by searching Triad Podcast Network on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much wherever you like to listen. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and those that contribute, we would truly appreciate a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It helps spread the word along, as do your shares on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Triad Podcast. To get in touch with us, simply email info@triadpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.